we really appreciate the very excellent and informative presentations regarding the Spatial Vision 2050 in EU, and particularly highlighting the spatial equity across European countries. We are very much impressed to see such a very comprehensive and very excellent studies regarding the future visions in European countries. As an discussant, I'd like to introduce some evidences in Japan, particularly regarding the high-speed rail accessibility and the region economy in Japan. Before starting my talk, I need to say that this is the stories about just in Japan. And as you, everybody knows, Japan is quite a small country and just a small island. So not like European Union, we do not have cross-border transportation, unfortunately. We have maritime or the air transportation for international travelers. Thereful, our discussion is quite domestic, but still our discussions and also our evidences could be relevant about the spatial distributions or the spatial equity issues caused by high-speed rail. So I'd like to talk a little bit high-speed rail issues in Japan. I have been told that I have just 5 minutes or something, so I will try to make my presentation.
Professor Kato, you can talk around 15 minutes.
Oh, really? Okay. Then I will talk a little bit slowly. Okay. So let me start with the high-speed rail in Japan. This is the current high-speed rail network in Japan, which illustrates the network covering from north to south with high-speed rail. And the different color in the network means the different types of high-speed rail, sometimes operated by different rail operators. As you see, from really North Island, it's called Hokkaido, to South Island, Kyushu, high-speed rail are well connected. And so first, the government has made much effort to connect the various areas, including not only the mega cities like Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka. This is a kind of corridors in Japan, Hokkaido corridors, where the most popular populations are located along this corridor, plus quite rural areas, peripheral areas in north, and also the south areas. And this kind of very big investments covering various areas are supported by Japan's government's national long-term comprehensive development plan. And it's quite similar to the Europeans' ideas, but limited just in Japan. And we also have discussed and debated for many years since 1960s regarding, for example, polycentricity as discussed by Professor Wegner, and also the balanced developments between urban area or the highly developed areas and the rural areas or peripheral areas for long-term sustainability of our country. And we expect that the developments and introductions of a high-speed rail network significantly contribute to the more balanced development across the nation. This is quite a quick summary of development history of Japan's high-speed rail. First high-speed rail lines was introduced connecting Tokyo with Osaka in 1964. And at that time, we had the first Olympic Games in Tokyo. We are still suffering from the second ones, as you know. After that, that line was extended to the westbound Sanyo Shinkansen developed in 1970s, and also extended to the north part, Tohoku Shinkansen. And after that, a little bit decade have passed without significant investments. Our government restarted the investment of high-speed rail network from roughly 2000, exactly to say the late 1990s, first to Nagano, and then Kyushu or the Hokuriku, or the further Hokkaido Shinkansen. So you see that we still have further dotted lines or the black lines that represents the planned lines or the under construction, including the maglev. I will explain a little bit. So our governments still have an intentions to extend our high-speed rail network covering all over the nation. This diagram summarize the Japan's GDP and the GDP growth from 1960s to 2016, and together with the timing of Shinkansen's investments. In 1960s to 70s, as you see, Japan experienced a very high rapid growth in economies, and we introduced high-speed rail network, and that's were expected to have contributed to the economic growth in Japan. Those bars represents our GDP. And until 1990, our high-speed rail has quite in line with the economic growth. However, late 1990s or the latest, our economy has a kind of a stagnant or not so clear economic growth, but still governments invested the high-speed rail, including the Nagano and the Kyushu and the Hokuriku. As far as I understand, in Japan, at the early stage until 1990s, one of the goals of high-speed rail is boost the economy in Japan. In line with the economic growth at that time. But after late 1990s, it is not expected to the national levels, macroscopic economic growth, rather more contributions to the regional balances or some polycentricities by improving accessibility to the peripheral areas. Then how have such a kind of investment contributed to the accessibility in Japan? This map shows the change in accessibility from 1981 to 2006 by the measures of average access time from each different prefecture. Please note that we have 47 prefectures in Japan. And the red colored area experienced very significant improvements of accessibility, more than 12% improvement in average access time. And blue colors or the green colors are less improvements of accessibility. You see that nearly along the high-speed rail network, maybe you imagine the area shown, accessibility has been improved, so where the high-speed rail was significantly introduced. Then our concern, one of the concerns was today's presentations or the seminars concerned is the spatial equity. So I illustrated the real GDP per worker from 1981 to 2016 by prefecture, and together with the high-speed rail line. And before 1981, the data over real GDP per worker by prefecture was not available. So we started from 1980s. Then you see, you found that in 1980s, nearly every prefecture has the almost same level of GDP per capita. 1986, already 1981, we had the major first two high-speed rail line, Tokaido and westbound, Sanyo Shinkansen. In 1986, high-speed rail was extended to north. And you may see that a little bit the color is changed from green to a little bit yellow greens along these black lines. We expect some impacts from high-speed rail on regional economy. 1991, further colors in along the high-speed rail. 1996, I think the Tokyo is a very high red colors, and other areas gradually along the high-speed rail experience better improvements. 2001, 2006, 2011, further high-speed rail network was extended, and 2016, you see many prefectures along the high-speed rail have orange colored. Tokyo has red colors, and even Hokkaido, it has North Island has a little bit orange colors. So high-speed rail connected regions have experienced quite so much improvements in real GDP per worker. However, from the viewpoints of spatial equity, yes, pointed out by earlier presentations, the areas with poor accessibility to high-speed rail network may have a little bit disadvantage with some poor performance of GDP per worker. For example, Kyushu Islands, it's a South Island, has a still green area, or the north of this high-speed rail line area has a little bit green. In such ways, peripheral areas may have some suffer from the poor performance still. So in that sense, as pointed by the Professor Wegner, high-speed rail may cause some disparities between areas where the high-speed rail is accessible and not accessible. I should give some latest issues regarding the further high-speed rail development in Japan. The government Japan has announced the Maghreb plans to connect the Tokyo and Nagoya as a kind of a second high-speed rail using the new technology of Maghreb. And according to the governments, Nagoya and Shinagawa, so two major cities, are connected with 40 minutes only. And but the capital cost required for construction is very huge because the planned lines are located in a quite mountainous areas, and should be quite costly. But it's planned to start the operation 2027. I'm not so sure that it's really realized or not because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And further, this line is planned to be extended to Osaka, another large cities from Tokyo, and it's expected roughly 67 minutes connection. And the government also shows the expected improvements of accessibility by introducing these new Maghreb lines. And this diagram shows 1 hour buffer zones from Tokyo, and the slightly light red colored area is a 2 hour buffer zone from Tokyo. Currently, Tokyo and Nagoya, Osaka is connected to high-speed rails along the coastal areas. So near these coastal areas has an advantage to have a better accessibility to Tokyo and other areas as well. But after introduction of Maghreb, these major 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dots are the planned stations over Maghreb, and that is expected to improve the accessibilities over areas near the stations. And the 1 hour buffer zone from Tokyo's have quite many areas in quite mountainous areas. Okay, so finally, so far I discussed only the high-speed rail issues, but as you know, introduction of high-speed rail is very costly. That is one of the barriers for us to extend the high-speed rail network, although many people, particularly peripheral areas, rural area, want to be connected with high-speed rail. So recently, quite unique and interesting cases have been found, introduced. And this is a kind of intermodal, interregional transportation system. And this case shows the connections of a high-speed rail plus intercity bus. And particularly in Kyushu area, this is the South Island in Japan, has a quite nice expressway network already. So by utilizing those existing expressway network, maybe even without high-speed rail network, connecting the high-speed railway network with intercity bus, rural area could gain some accessibility improvements. And particularly for this case, for examples as shown in photos on the right bottom, exteriors of intercity bus is very similar to the high-speed rail exteriors. So passengers feel some kind of consistencies or the connectivities even from the exteriors. Of course, the coordinated timetables between two different travel modes and the well-designed connection at the stations for better transfer, and also discounting and integrated ticketing. It's a kind of a mass. So we expect that the introduction of new technologies, even without very expensive high-speed rail. Of course, high-speed rail is a very good technology for connecting cities with high-speed rail, high-speed. But by integrating various technologies, I expect that the improvements of accessibility in rural area is possible in a reasonable way. Okay, that is the end of my presentation for the discussions in response to the presentation. So if you have some questions or some integrations discussion together with Professor Wegener's presentation in Europe, I'm very happy to get new insights. Thank you very much.